what we're talking about today, we are often asked about nutrients important for raising low blood cell counts. And this is common because with cancer treatment or even with some cancers, our bone marrow, where our blood cells originate, may not be able to produce as many as they should. And the different functions of our blood cells are like our white blood cells help with infection, managing infection, fighting infection as part of our immune system. The red blood cells help to transport oxygen throughout the body, giving us energy. And our platelets are important for blood clotting. So if your platelets are low, there's more of a chance that you have risk of bleeding. People ask us because sometimes when they're getting their treatment, they come in for their next cycle of treatment, they look at their blood count, and the team says, your blood count's too low, we need to defer your treatment for a week or so. So although there aren't any magical or miracle foods that can raise blood count, there are some nutrients that can help build new blood cells. And so that's what we're going to concentrate on today. So they are your protein, of course. We always talk about protein, and it's an important one for building blood cells. And then we have vitamin B12 and folate and iron. We'll also talk about some food safety tips, just because if your white blood cell counts are low, then you're more prone to infection. So food safety is really important. But that's enough about me. We know why everyone is here. We want to get into the recipes. And the first recipe Jeremy has prepared for us today is pan con tomate, really tomato bread, or bread with tomato, with white beans. And this recipe is rich in 3 of the blood-building nutrients we've mentioned. So the protein, the iron, and folate. It also contains some vitamin B12 with the addition of anchovies, which I think, yes, I see them here. So it looks like we're gonna add some anchovies today. But we also want to highlight the combination of white beans and tomato and how it showcases one of our favorite power couples. So plant foods that contain iron and foods rich in vitamin C. So the white beans contain a rich source of plant iron, and it's known as non-heme iron. And our body cannot absorb this form of iron easily or efficiently as it does from animal foods. However, pair it with vitamin C rich nutrients like the tomatoes in this recipe, and we're able to absorb more of the iron from the white beans. How cool is that? Okay, turning over to Jeremy.
Thank you, Daniela, and welcome. So we're going to move on to, our pan con tomate, which is a Spanish recipe. This is inspired from a dish. We're going to make a few tweaks here, so it's going to be exactly the same. But if you've never had it before, it's sort of the Spanish version of bruschetta, kind of. So tomato and bread. I may get disowned by my family, but I think this one is better. So this is my favorite version of tomato bread. And, perfect timing. We are entering the end of summer. I know, cover your ears. But this is the perfect time for tomatoes. Tomatoes are sort of like in their peak now. They taste fantastic. So many varieties. So this dish, it is very simple. We're going to make, like I mentioned, some tweaks to add some extra protein, hit on some of those nutrients that Daniela talked about. But it's simple, but it also captures, for me, the sort of peak of summer. So it's a really, really nice, fresh summer dish. Let's get right into it. So what we're doing is we have some tomatoes. You can use any tomatoes you want. You have some plum tomatoes. You can get some heirloom tomatoes. You'll see now, this is the time to like the San Marzano tomatoes, maybe like a variety too, really nice and sweet. And what we're going to do is just use a regular box grater. So regular cheese box grater you might have at home. You can use other graters as well, but I like the sort of larger tooth of the box grater. I think it works perfectly for this dish.
How ripe are the tomatoes? Like, I guess they have to be firm, a little firm.
Yeah, I mean, even if like you want them to be ripe, just because they don't taste best.
Yeah.
Not like overripe where they're like soft and falling apart. But I mean, even if it gives a little bit, that's fine. Because we're going to throw it through the grater. So the idea with the grater is it's going to, so we're going to use the bigger tooth on here on the grater, and we're just going to run my tomato up and down, and we're essentially separating the pulp of the tomato from the skin of the tomato. Okay? Now, the box grater can be sharp, so make sure that your fingers are out of the way. As you can see here, confirming with the camera, I'll turn it slowly. I'm using pretty much the palm of my hand, fingers up, to just push the tomato through the box grater. I also, looking at the proportion or the difference in size, I chose a very large grater and a very small bowl. So maybe do the opposite and choose a bigger bowl. So you can see that we're left with just the skin, okay? And
that safety component is really important just because we talked about our platelets, and if our platelets are low, then our ability to clot blood is affected. So risk of bleeding is a factor.
Yeah, absolutely. Kitchen safety, very important. So I'll show you, before I do the rest of it here, we have this really, really nice sort of tomato pulp.
And those of us here, we can really smell the freshness of those tomatoes.
Yes. You smell the tomato, audience, remember? All right, back to grating tomatoes. And maybe I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, sure. So since we're talking about tomatoes, and I mentioned that they're a great source of vitamin C, if we're looking at the value, if we're looking at our recommended daily intake, we're getting about 20% of our vitamin C when we're looking at one small tomato. So depending on how much you would be eating of the pan con tomate, you could be getting a good amount there. And it also contains folate, so there is a little bit of folate in this, and folate is important for the formation of both our red blood cells and white blood cells. And then, I mean, you can't talk about tomatoes without talking about lycopene. That's really the claim to fame for tomatoes, and it is a red pigment. We see our red tomatoes. We also see some green tomatoes, so we might be getting some other types of phytonutrients there. And lycopene is an antioxidant, and it also has some anti-inflammatory properties for it.
Beautiful. Okay, so you can grate as many tomatoes as you need, depends on how many of these toasts or breads you're going to make. I'm just going to stop at like 4 small ones. Obviously, if you have more to make, you can continue. So again, the skins discarded, and then just make sure we get all that pulp, that really, really nice tomato pulp in there.
It's starting to smell like my mom's kitchen at the end of August when they start to do all the tomato processing.
This is the time.
Yes, I think you still do that, Jeremy, don't
Yes,
you?
we do. This is the exciting time. Year, tomato
We
time.
see some nods in the audience. They're familiar with this too.
Yes, tomato time. All right, so we have our tomato pulp, right? A little bit of work there. Just show you here. No skins. If some come through, you can, you can take it out if you want, or it's not a huge bother. You can just leave it in. And then to this, you can add different flavors. So I'm going to add some basil leaves, and what's nice is you don't have to really muck around with it too much. Just throw a few leaves in there. We'll add a little bit of olive oil, really nice pairing, and a little pinch of salt.
Just because you added the olive oil, it's good to point out I mentioned lycopene, and adding a little bit of olive oil, processing the tomato a little bit, actually helps us absorb more of the lycopene from the food. So this is a good way to do it.
Beautiful. All right, so just mixing that together. A little bit of salt, a little bit of olive oil, and those basil leaves, and that's it. You can set that in the fridge or set it aside if you're making it right away. You can do this the day before. The flavors will actually come together a little bit better. So the basil will start to perfume the tomatoes much more. If you can even add a whole garlic clove in there if you want some garlic flavor. So you can do it the day before, leave it in the fridge, and then plate it the next day if you need. I probably wouldn't go too much beyond that because then you're going to start to lose like that really nice freshness. But otherwise, we're going to make this right away. So I'm going to put the tomatoes to the side. Now, I mentioned that we're going to make a little tweak here with these tomato toast, tomato bread. Traditionally, you would see, again, just a little bit of this tomato on top of the really nice crisp bread and maybe an anchovy. And I don't want to take that away because that's one of my favorite parts of this dish is that anchovy, sometimes you see. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a really nice anchovy dressing for some white beans, canned white beans. Protein.
Excellent protein, excellent fiber, also economical. If you're concerned about sodium or salt, you can purchase the kind that look at the label that says no salt. You can also rinse them, or actually it's important to rinse your canned beans, right? Just to get rid of that indigestible carbohydrate that it contains, less gassiness.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so to make this dressing, we have our anchovies. And the recipe I put this as optional. Not everyone's a fan of anchovies. However, what I will say is in this dressing, it sort of is in the background, and you just have this incredible sort of umami, this really nice savoriness. So if you're afraid of anchovies, maybe start with a little bit, but definitely try it in this preparation, this dressing. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
I'm someone who is afraid of
anchovies, all right.
And I'm still, on the fence about it. And this conversation just reminded me of when I was in Spain, and I remember being in Seville, and I remember them chasing me to try the anchovies.
Chasing you, like down the street?
They're on the street, right? They're like, oh, have some of this, have some of this. I'm like, I'm not sure. So then they're like, no, you need to. And so they'd actually bring it to me and say, try it. And you know what? It was good. It was good.
I love it. It's fantastic. If you're familiar with like I just call it W sauce because I can never pronounce it, but the Worcestershire sauce, the major component in it is anchovy, right? So that's where you get that wonderful flavor. So just roughly
I did not know that.
There you go.
Audience, you knew that. Oh my goodness. Wow.
So we have our anchovy roughly chopped. I like to mince it a little bit further. So what I'll do is just use the side of my knife and just mush it into the cutting board just so you get this nice paste. And that way, especially if you're not a big fan of anchovy, it will sort of like just disappear into the dressing. All right, so we have this really nice anchovy.
The cool thing about anchovy is it's high in protein. It does have vitamin B12, but it also has 55% of our needs for selenium. That's a nutrient that sometimes we don't get enough of. And selenium also plays a role. It's more of a supportive role with building blood cells, but it's important for our immune system and building blood. So I will get to my anchovies. I will try it today with the anchovies.
Love it. All right, so anchovy in there. In our bowl, we have a little bit of Dijon. You can use the grainy or the smooth variety. I happen to have the grainy here. So I'm using. We're going to add a little bit of vinegar. You can use red wine or white wine vinegar here. I've got about, I'm going to go with 1.5 tablespoons because I have a small can of beans. Okay, and just start to mix that in. And then a little bit of olive oil. And we'll double up with the olive oil. So we went with 1.5 tablespoons of vinegar. So I'll go with about 3 tablespoons, 2 to 3 tablespoons of olive oil. And you can just sort of mix that in. You could also shake this in like a little mason jar. Might be a little bit easier. Just so it comes together. And now this is a dressing that we're going to use with the bean salad, but this is even nicer like a marinade, even just for almost like a Caesar vinaigrette, something that's not as like creamy. The anchovies again, so much flavor. If you want to put some fresh herbs, you can do that. I have some chives. What is this?
I saw that moment of.
Whisk that through, and there we go. There's our dressing.
Oh gosh, that smells really good too.
We're gonna
There
add
go
our
the
drained and rinsed. These are already drained and rinsed beans in there, and toss.
You might see on the container it said cannellini beans, and that's one type of white bean. I, of course, had to do a bit more research and realize that we have different varieties. So navy beans, great northern beans, lima beans, the baby lima beans, they're also white beans. So I guess you could use any of those. And white kidney beans, right? Yeah. Well, that's the cannellini beans. You can see why I'm the dietitian, Jeremy's the chef, because my food literacy is it's okay. It's not great.
It's good.
It's getting there.
It's improving. A little bit of black pepper and just a small pinch of salt. We have some saltiness coming from the anchovies, and even just a little bit from the Dijon mustard. So I don't need too much. You can season that to taste, and there is our nice little bean salad. Obviously, this can be a salad on its own, a component on its own. It's wonderful, flavorful. This is for our tomato breads. So we have our tomato, we have our little topping, a protein topping, bean salad. We're gonna finish this up. Bread. You can use whatever bread you like, whole grain.
Yeah. Is this whole grain or
Is this sourdough?
it's a sourdough? Okay.
You can find a nice whole grain. But
Yeah.
you can definitely.
But that's okay because we're getting a lot of fiber from the kidney bean, the cannellini beans, so that's okay. And I mean, of course, it depends on where you're at with your treatment and how you're feeling with your GI system. So maybe you don't need a lot of fiber right now. Mm-hmm.
So I'm using a grill pan because we're in the basement of a hospital and open flame is discouraged. But you can do this on the barbecue. You can do this in your toaster. You can do this inside your oven under the broiler. Whatever works for you. But we want some nice crust on the bread. So thick slices work best here. Again, because we're adding a wet component to it, I don't want it to get soggy. So thicker and really nice crust. So you can see a little bit of that sort of that char, that caramelization, that Maillard reaction on the outside. Nice and crusty. This is also going to help with the second part. So while it is nice and hot and warm, this is my favorite. Take a clove of garlic and you just grate it over top. Okay? This is going to perfume the bread with just like the perfect amount of garlic flavor. It's not overpowering. You're not going to get too much heat. It's not going to, make people want to stand 20 feet away from you. It's just the perfect amount of garlic. And you'll see as you're grating it, it'll start shaving the garlic down. Because of that toasted bread, that sort of abrasion, it's almost like a little micro grater. Cool. And so you're getting, just these small little bits of garlic into all the little crevices on the bread. It's absolutely amazing.
I'm mouth is watering.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but
I love this part. I could just grate garlic over bread all day and probably get nothing accomplished, but I would be very happy.
I'll be there to eat it, especially with some of the tomato here and
there we go.
Cannellini beans.
Okay, so we have our bread ready. Let's plate. So we're going to get that beautiful tomato pulp and spoon it on top.
So while you're doing that, just wanted to talk about another nutrient that's really important, and that's copper. And the cannellini beans, or the white beans here, provide about 27% of our daily value of copper. And copper also plays a role indirectly in red blood cell production. So basically what you're getting from us today is that yes, there are 4 key nutrients for blood building, but don't just focus on those 4. Make sure you have a wide variety of foods in the diet because there are a lot of other nutrients that play a supportive role. Oh my gosh. But you know what? Let's just get back to the taste and the flavor and the eye appeal here. Gorgeous.
Carefully focused, not making a mess here. And there we go. So
I'm so excited to be
tomato
here
on top,
today.
some of those white beans with that anchovy dressing,
Gorgeous.
and playing with the focus here, challenging our camera. And he's doing a wonderful job. And there we go. There is our pan con tomate
Beautiful, beautiful.
with white bean.